Hi. Okay, thank you everyone for staying behind. I'd like to open it up quite soon to the audience, but maybe just to get the ball rolling, I've got a couple of questions for both Mr. Rajagopal as well as Mr. Rajendra, because both of your films are made respectively for Mr. Rajendra, it's 1979, right?
Actually, it took 5 years to make this.
I see, okay.
I started making in when my second child was born,
Okay.
1974. So I was waiting for him to grow up,
Right.
but I was very impatient. After 5 years, I gave up. so, so it is the journey, a nice journey, lovely journey for 6 years,
Right.
5, 6 years, and I look at the films and all that.
Mm.
They are very nice films,
Mm.
you know, the new generation especially.
Right.
But I feel lonely. You know why?
Mm.
I have only 3 characters. Everybody has so many characters. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So by the way, your son is in the audience today. Does he want to say hi to the yeah? So that's the main star of the film.
Yeah.
My child, my child. My child.
And
Yes, of course. Yes, and of course
without her, I couldn't make the film at all.
of course, yes, yes. Of course, the
My wife from
the
and they are the actors.
Oh yes,
So we call them naturals.
non-professional but good actors. Okay. What about Raja? Your film was made in '96.
95.
95. Okay.
Yeah, but it was released, shown in 96.
Right. So the question I have for actually both of you, since those were films that were made late in the mid '70s and the mid '90s, is what has changed in Singapore since you made those films, and what do you think your film recorded or captured of that time?
Basically, I didn't think much when I was doing it. Really, I was not conscious about anything. I was not. I just, I was just eager because it was a time this is the second film. I made one earlier, and as you can see, I had very little technical knowledge as well about filmmaking at that time. It was just this enthusiasm to tell stories. So I didn't pay attention to a lot of things. So it was just shot in anything, anywhere, anybody who would do me favors, or any place that I could get hold for free. There was no lighting, there was no lights, everyone was not an actor. They were all real people, friends actually, classmates. At that time, I was not conscious about these things. So, I mean, whatever that was captured there was just pure. I mean, I'm still filming in MRT stations. If James would tell you, we just did one at a station. So, 25 years later, that is something I'm still doing. But yeah, I mean, the environment has changed. I mean, a lot of things have changed. I mean, if you ask me about change, it's a big change. I mean, the way I do things, the way it was done. So, in a lot of ways, yeah.
Right. So it's not just what you were filming, but also the technology at that time as well, right? And I noticed, like in Mr. Rajendra's film, it was on 16 mm.
Yes. I dared to buy a 16 mm camera. At that time, actually, nobody wanted to invest money in that, and we didn't have the luxury of video where you can take the shot and you don't like it, just delete it. I had to be very careful at that time. I'm comparing that time with today's time. That time we shoot a film, but we don't know how the result will be, because we can't see at that time when we're shooting, but we had a little bit confidence yeah, what we are doing is not bad. And since the films are very costly, film stocks, and doing sound is really a tedious job. So whenever I take a shot, I think twice. I don't have to take the second shot because otherwise I'll be wasting film.
Yeah.
Not like today, there are sponsors. My time there are no sponsors. I was a sponsor, the producer, director. I couldn't pay any money to anybody else, so I became like
one man show. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, thank you. If I can also, I just like to mention that what's interesting for me about that film is that the moment of its production, you can see it because it's 16 mm, but it's also aged. So you can see a kind of pinking as well, and when you see that, you can sort of place it, oh, this is probably like a 70s film, without it even being intentionally like that, because the material has aged over time. Yeah, I want to jump to Wesley now, about your film, which I love in how insane it is. but was there anything kind of intentional with that home video kind of aesthetic? What did you film it on, and how did you try to achieve that look? That's the first question. The second is, a lot of them have mentioned working with amateur actors or unprofessional ones. For your actors, right? Did you tell them to act badly deliberately? Or was that kind of like natural for them? I don't know. Yeah.
So for Park and Sun was shot on mini DV, I believe. I think that's the only thing we could afford to rent at that point in time. I think in post we made it look a little bit bad, but I think it was shot really bad as well to begin with, so kind of just went with it. In terms of acting, I was really lucky to have friends who would come in and act multiple roles, and also after finish acting, go and do the behind the scenes and help out as crew. So it was a fun time where we had friends to just come together and just make a film for fun, with no pressure, with no expectations of how the film would turn out as well. In terms of why some of the acting or most of the acting is bad, yeah, one reason is because all the actors are not actors, so they are my friends, so we don't have any acting background. So that's why it looks a bit bad. But then I think that is the thing that makes the show kind of what it is at the same time. So maybe this is the one-off thing where it actually kind of works, but in another scenario, I think it won't be a good idea.
Yeah. So I really felt there's something about that over-earnestness and all that just became camp. You know, it became that aesthetic. And there's this saying, right, which is tragedy plus time is comedy. And then I really do feel that earnestness plus time is camp. Yeah, because they were so mugging for the camera and all. Yeah. Okay, I want to talk to the other three production designers and directors right now, because I noticed in your films there's a very conscious attempt to try to recreate what the past looked like, whether it's the 80s, 70s, etc. Could you tell us some of the challenges that comes along with that? Other than budget, of course, but what are some of the difficulties in doing that, especially in Singapore, where I feel that sometimes we are running out of the past, in the sense that sometimes you see film locations and you're like, okay, this is Kampung Lorong Buangkok, this is Ubin, this is, it's kind of overused. So what are the particular challenges about recreating the past in Singapore?
Budget it is part of it, but I mean, you're talking about a city which has changed on such a speed and a pace in a small area, whereas if, say, you look at Malaysia, there's such a size of a country that you will be able to find places which maybe haven't changed. So in terms of Nocturne, obviously we're not shooting on a set. We can't build a set, you have to find the locations. And every year those locations get less and less. So that particular house actually was a furniture store that I know the owners in Gayle, and it was quite nice in a way because they were going to renovate that place, and they hadn't really touched too much of it since the 60s, and they were renovating the following 1 or 2 months. So I kind of like asked them, you know, let's do it in a way also for your memory, you know. So sometimes there's something nice which comes out of a film which actually has nothing to do with the film whatsoever, you know. So yeah, it's very tricky in Singapore. You can find the props, you can find small items, but in all these films you look carefully and there's giveaways, you know. Like in Reunion Dinner, there's that one scene where you can see the busy road in the background and the traffic's, you know, in the background, boom, that's your moment, you know. And in all these films in Singapore, it's almost impossible, and it gets harder and harder and harder until you. I mean, if you're fortunate, you know, you do something like Seven Good Road comes and they build an entire set in Batam. But then you have the difficulty of making a set which really looks like 64, and that's tough. That's tough. That's why the National Archives, like, you know, we come here and we sit and we look at all these photos and people forget what Singapore was in 64. And then even when you look at photos, I'm going on a bit, but if you look at a photo and you search, say you search for a photo 1964, and you look at the picture of that kitchen, but the thing is you're not looking at 1964. When you go home today and you go into your kitchen, I bet you like 70% of the stuff in your kitchen you bought in 2010. 2011. So you have all this confusion within your research. It's like even when you look at a photo at a certain date, you're never actually looking at that time. You're looking at something which has had a lifespan up to that point. You know, all you know is that there's nothing, you know, beyond it. So it's really interesting. It's very difficult. And someone else should talk.
Fantastic. No, thank you so much for sharing those insights. And of course, thank you for pointing out that we are in a particular building that's dedicated to storing information about the past and its classification and retrieval. Yeah. What about Raihan and Gayle?
For me, in the 80s, I was still a young boy, so I had to remember what I see or hear or what I wanted in that era. And which is a problem because a lot of the stuff are there's a lot of pop cultural reference to it, which is like toys or the cartoons or Mat Yo-Yo and all that stuff, right? And to get the rights are practically impossible sometimes. But I, again, very naive, and I just went with Ninja Turtles. I think if Hasbro finds out about it, I'll be in trouble now. But yeah, that's one of the things. For me, the challenge that I had was that I had to remember back as a child, what was the thing that I remembered, like Coco, this chocolate treat that we have when we were young, Ninja Turtle, and yeah, and the one thing that is great is that I managed to work with the late Isha Ahmad and Mastur Ahmad, who I grew up watching, and that kind of like helped as well for me. Yeah, that's it.
Because they were sort of like 80s stars on Malay TV, right?
Correct,
At that point of time, yeah. What about Gayle?
We had a pretty intense 3 months prep for this film, and we knew that a lot of generations were going to watch it, so we were very careful in the authenticity of the film. For the challenges, it started with casting the kid. Basically, we needed to look for a child that can speak Hokkien fluently, and we needed to look for the street kids and also the main child for the 60s. We needed children who are very carefree, who are very daring, garang, like kampong kids. So we went to a lot of schools to look for the children. Then we categorized them like 80s looking kids, the kids that are more 60s. And actually we didn't find the main child until Altec Recce Scout. And he happened to run into the barber shop when we were scouting the barber shop, because it was really hard to find children who could still speak dialect fluently in this era. And he was from Malaysia and just moved over. So there's a lot of different behavior compared to the children in Singapore nowadays. So he was our 60s child. And then locations was very hard, like James mentioned as well. We were walking like 2 or 3 days around shophouses just to look for the interior. And we managed to find this shophouse. It was not renovated, untouched, from the 60s. And we begged at that moment they were going to start renovation, we stopped the people from renovating. We called the owners and we begged them to hold off renovation for 1.5 weeks. Yeah, and even the street set in the 60s, at that moment where we wanted, it was TV World, at the moment when we wanted to borrow it for a day of filming, police, the SPF just took over for training, and we had to also write like a few weeks of letters up to the police to ask them for the location. So, and Margaret Drive was the 80s building, which is really gone now. Yeah, in Margaret Drive there were a lot of furniture that were left behind from the 60s, from the 70s and 80s. And our art department, the production department, everyone went to Margaret Drive to carry furniture down all the different houses, leftover furniture. That was what dressed the whole entire street. Yeah, so it was a lot of hard work from everyone, every department. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for pointing out that it's not just about production design or art direction, right? Sometimes casting as well.
And also like imaging and all that. We had barbers, actual street barbers, to come in to cut every single child and man's hair. And the ladies, every single woman that was in the film, we had to look for people who had existing hair from the eras, because we didn't have the budget to recreate all their hairs. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I mean, so much detail and care goes into that. I'd just like to open up to the audience. Anyone's got questions?
I don't know if this question is, or this discussion is too valid, but I realized the film is CMIO. And was that on purpose? Is this something that we should even think about still? I don't know.
Yeah.
But like, I would be most curious to know if that was in part of your consideration.
Right.
And also, what if this entire program was like Malay short films?
Right. No, it's a good question. As in, was I looking out for some kind of like ethnic kind of representation? Because got one Eurasian, got two Indians, one Malay director, and two Chinese. I think maybe not so overtly. I think one of the things that I was thinking of was there are certain kinds of, say, cultural traditions that influence the way people look at the past kind of differently. So let's say someone's nostalgia, if I can use that word, about circumcision. I mean, it'll be very different in terms of life experiences from, let's say, a Chinese family that goes through reunion dinner over the years, right? So I think there are multiple pasts that are inflected by your own cultural background, and therefore I really wanted to show as much of that as possible, And of course we're all Singaporeans, but I think we do have different kind of life trajectories as well. Yeah. Okay. It's not political correctness. It was really trying to show, a very plural Singapore.
Can I direct my question to Wesley? Yeah, and I was just wondering, do you feel that that the sense of humor that's presented in your film still holds up today? Like, because when I was watching your film, I was really thinking about the kind of comedy that you were watching at the time and how it inspired you to make this film.
Hi, thanks for your question. I'm not sure how to answer it, but when this film was made in 2007, when I played it to friends, when I played it, I think it was played at a substation. I think people didn't really know how to react to it. Should I be laughing, or is this supposed to be funny? Like, oh yeah, those kind of things. And I think 13 years later, 12 years later, it's still kind of the same. Yeah. So, but in terms of what inspired me and what inspired the humor behind the show, I'm not too sure. I watched a lot of sitcoms growing up. That could have come. It could have come from that. I do like melodramaticness, over the top things. At that point in time, I think I enjoyed it a lot. So I think in this film it had that. I think this film was made just right after I finished national service. So I think my brain wanted to kind of escape certain things, and so it kind of exploded in this film. Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Thanks, Wesley. Okay, any other questions? The audience? Yes, Nicole?
Hi, thanks for being here. So I think there was a question in Nocturne, Jia Kai's film, that was asked. I think Jin Feng was playing the director. He was saying, what is natural? So just a question for all of you. What is your idea of a natural Singaporean film? I'm just curious, because I think in Reunion Dinner, at the end, the child speaks English. That's, I think, the first time English is uttered in the film.
Mm.
So things like that. What is, naturalism in Singaporean film?
Good question. Shall we go from Mr. Rajendra down the line? As a director, what do you think is natural in Singapore cinema?
There are two ways of answering your question. One is the director observes, write the story, write the actions and all that. Then he explains this to the actor. This is the way to be done. Now the actor does his own way, naturally. He's not forced acting. He's now the director doesn't really do this. He can only say if this is from one point to that point, or one place to another place, to only direction. But when it comes to the acting, then the director has to look at the actor and see how he acts before he tells him how not to act, how to act. But if he acts naturally, the way the people behave or he behaves or in the storyline, so the director accepts that. This is one kind of natural. The other naturals they are not actors. They are just walking in the street or doing housework or doing things as they are doing. They do themselves. They are not told, you do this, you do that. So that comes under the actual documentary style, that go on the location and film what is happening. So this is called another way of looking at natural, and not actors, those are natural characters. So that's what I can think now. Thank you for asking the question, and let me think more.
I mean, in regards to Reunion Dinner, it was based off Anthony's research with seniors, with people, and he realized that he fought really hard to actually maintain Hokkien in the first era in the 60s, because actually they wanted, because it was a presentation also to the late Lee Kuan Yew, so they wanted to dub everything in Mandarin, but we fought really hard to keep it as authentic as possible, and that to us is natural, and he wanted it to feel naturally progressing like how it was in Singapore, from Hokkien from dialect to Mandarin mixed dialect, and then to, of course, English speaking, more predominant in English speaking society. That's why there was English at the end. Yeah.
Okay, natural in terms of art, it's like Nocturne. Like the thing which always bugs me is the kerosene lamp on the bed. It's like what is, it shouldn't really be there. So then you have that. It's like what's pretty in film, what's beautiful, and film at the end of the day, like we're not making documentaries. It's not a documentary. So I think there's always that artistic license. It's where the director's coming from. If the director wants to go down that route, we can do it. Nocturne, if you realize there's a few things, like you leave a little bit of the 70s plastic, and the stove is actually more sort of 70s, 80s. So you're trying to mix it a little bit, that it's not 60s, 70s, or 70s, late 70s. But that's such a difficult question, actually. What is natural? I mean, it's a fiction. I would say the closest, maybe when we did Yellowbird is maybe as natural in terms of art direction. I did in a way, as brutally beautiful, but in a brutal reality. Nocturne is actually you're examining the process of making a film. It's kind of, that's part of the whole script, you know, the idea of it. And at the end of it, I mean, what's natural is we want to make a film. Like that's natural, and then it can be anything. I think, pass on.
I think for me, naturally, it depends on what kind of film you're looking at. I mean, if you look at Reunion Dinner or you're looking at Nocturne, it feels realistic. But then when you see like Sunat or even Wesley's film, right, it's not real. That you mentioned is hyper real. For Sunat, I was very specific in the sense that I want to tell the point of view from this little kid and how horrifying circumcision is. So everything is played slightly bigger. From the camera angles to the style, so that felt natural for that film. But it also depends. When I'm doing some of my other projects, it is authentic and natural to the film that I was making. And yeah.
With Raja, I also feel that you can talk about your film in the Seven Letters project, which is The Flame, right? Which was shot black and white and set in the which era?
70s.
70s.
Yeah. I mean, it was late 60s, 70s, yeah. So my films can be divided into pre-James, period, when I did it without art direction, and when James came into my films, and, then you have another reality. So for me, the reality is when I was making those films that, I mean, like, for example, The Glare, what was my reality? And that became what was I had to deal with, right? So the actress in the film couldn't speak Tamil. She couldn't speak a word, or she could only speak English, and so I made her. I took out the dialogue in the film for her, and so she became very unnatural in some ways for me. That whole idea of not speaking, but at the end I rationalized it differently. That her silence meant that she was actually being close to the world, the reality that was in front of her. So there are certain things that sometimes you work with the story, and the conditions you have then. But a lot of times I do try to. I mean, that's why it culminated in A Yellow Bird, because I was always struggling with that. I wanted to always find that realism in films. That's why, if you want to talk about The Flame, James recreated that era. I mean, it was the most elaborate set I think I've ever worked in, because he went in for the details, because we were allowed to. So sometimes there's no budget. So, but a film like A Yellow Bird didn't require that, but it had a different kind of reality to it. So that's how I work, according to the story.
Natural, I think for me, natural is the direct opposite of Park and Sons, because Park and Sons is like highly unnatural. But in terms of making films and when you're trying to capture the natural, I guess it's about, you're always trying to capture these pockets of natural moments, but it's all put together in a very unnatural way, because there's a consequence of time when you're making a film, and life doesn't go that way unless you make a film in real time. But so I think for me, we're always trying to capture that, and it depends on the kind of film you're making as well. And that's a tough question.
Well, good question, because I think there are all these terms involved with the word natural, which is what is realistic, what is authentic, what is true, what is the truth value of the image, for example, yeah? Okay, maybe I can take like one last question.
My question is really for the curator. So in these choice of films we see today, we see a lot of diversity and pluralism among the collection. But why do you think we don't see an experience of Singapore where we have all of that diversity and pluralism today in the same film?
In the same film, you mean? In the same film? Oh, okay. Wow. I think that's a good question, and I think it's got a lot to do with the nature of those films. So let's say it is a family drama, then I think it'll be quite kind of like in terms of the cultural background, unless you really intentionally in the script, it's a family that's like good friends with you know, a different family from another kind of like cultural background, then you have that. But I think why they tend to be kind of monocultural is it's kind of reflective of, I think, some people's social circles, I believe. Yeah. So, yeah. I don't know whether that's a satisfying answer, but I feel it does depend on the nature of the story. Yeah. Thank you. Thanks for that. I feel like that's a kind of like a National Day question. like we just had National Day yesterday. Yeah. But thank you for that. Okay, any final burning questions? Anyone? No? Going once, going twice? Yes!
I was puzzling over the glare because I was trying to figure out what it was all about. Maybe for somebody else. But I do realize something. Probably of all the films, that seems to have the most in terms of different races. You do have a Chinese shopkeeper who is sympathetic enough to give that TV set to that woman. And then you have that, you know, when the part earlier in the movie when she falls asleep and somebody comes up and wakes her up and says that's it. And I was trying to figure out what that was supposed to denote. Because from my memory, what I recollect was that it was community centers that used to have television sets there where people could go and watch television for free. And well, I guess one of the things I was trying to place was also the era that you were reflecting. Because obviously you have this place where you have the MRT trains already running, which actually sort of provided an indication of the year it was. And yet, it was harping back to the community centers where you used to watch television. And that was sometime like dating back to the 1960s. I'm not sure where it would come. So actually, it'd be good if you could sort of explain that movie a little. Tell us what it was all about. Thank you.
I mean, it was about actually obsession, my own obsession with films and TV and watching TV all the time. But it was also about, if you're looking at the locations, I mean, it was a reality. I shot it in a place, but it has changed. It was Tanjung Pagar Community Center. I had to look for it, and there were a lot of foreign workers watching films at that time because in the 90s, this was in the 90s, the trains were there. I mean, that was shot in Yishun or Khatib MRT station, but the community centers, yes, I remember going to the centers to watch it because the kindergartens were there as well. You know, PAP ran their kindergartens in the same community centers, but the TV sets were still on, and I shot in that very location. The only thing that I didn't cut to the TV was because it was late, and they had already switched off the television. So by the time I used the reverse shot, there was an Indian man, he was real, he was not an actor, he was really watching TV. But by the time I wanted to shoot it, they said, no, sorry, time's up. But the actors, I mean, it was Chinatown Point, and the lady was just a colleague of mine who I asked her to be. I mean, I was not conscious about what race the person should be, it was who was available. So the two of them who did it were my colleagues in different jobs that I did at that time. So one was from another job, and I had a night job, and so I asked the person to come just before he went for night shift. So these, you know, it was just making do, you see, but it was a reality. So it was about this obsession with TV, television, because the person who actually, I used to go to Tanglin, I don't know whether you all know, there's this guy who had, a British person who had video shops, and so he used to show me all these old films. So I used to sit and watch these old films. So he gave me David Lean's Brief Encounter. And so that's how I got obsessed with trains, because I had shot a film, my first film was about trains, and it was also documenting my mother. She's no more, so actually these films are very important to me because, not that about the location and everything, but all these early films, I had my mother in them. So it was quite nice even watching her. I forgot, you know, just now when she appeared in that scene where she was taking the kid to Woodbridge Hospital was being built at that time. So That was where the real Woodbridge is now, the hospital. But I shot in the old Woodbridge. I shot in the old Woodbridge Hospital because Dr. Jennifer Lee gave me permission just to shoot the corridors. So this is how I worked the film. So it was about my obsession with films at that time.
Well, it's interesting hearing about that from you because when I was watching it, So thanks for the explanation because at least now I can make a little bit more sense out of what I was watching.
So everything was recreated. The interviews, Zoe, Tay, Jacinta. I mean, she was trying to emulate them. You know, like I gave her looked at interviews and recreated television of that time.
All right, and I actually, because we're talking about the racial aspect and this being Singapore, and I did notice, I think who was it, the colleague at the MRT station was Malay, wasn't she, or something like that? So you did cover all the races.
I did, but it wasn't conscious at that time. I think I do it more consciously now.
Okay, thank you so much, and thank you for that note, Raja, where you said that sometimes there's that personal dimension to the films as well, right? You capture people who are in the bloom of the youth and they are immortalized on celluloid forever. So thank you so much, and please give a hand to all these wonderful panelists today. They've given us a lot to think about in terms of what is history in cinema as well as cinema in history. So thank you so much once again. Thank you to all of you for staying behind. Thank you.
And I'd like to thank Alfian as well for doing the moderation and curating this. We also have a second screening, a repeat screening of this slate of films next Wednesday. If anyone is interested to come back or ask a friend to come here, please feel free to tell them. And also a shout out for the rest of the weekend. So we are having tomorrow the official selection of Singapore Shots. So these are the brand new, the latest ones of the 2018 and 2019 official selection. So it's currently fully registered, but if you're interested to come by and try your luck, feel free to do so. I'd like to thank everyone here for being with us and have a nice evening. Thank you.